Some years are just years. They come and go. But others, they're fault lines. They're the moments where everything changes. And for the music we listen to today, 2001 wasn't just a transition. It was the year the old world shattered and our new one crawled out of the wreckage.
And I'm not just being dramatic. People who've studied this call 2001 a violent rupture. So think less of a gentle fade-out and more like a head-on collision between two completely different universes of music.
Because on one side, you had the absolute peak of the old guard. We're talking boy bands selling millions of physical CDs, everyone watching TRL, a shared pop culture. But on the other side, you had the chaotic birth of our modern era, MP3s, digital anarchy, and a world where everyone's listening to their own thing. Well, 2001 is the year these two timelines smashed right into each other.
So let's really set the scene. In early 2001, the music industry was, they were on top of the world. Physical CD sales were through the roof. The party felt like it would never, ever end. The problem was, they were dancing right on the edge of a cliff and had absolutely no idea. Just look at this number, 1.8 million. What is that? That is how many copies of NSYNC's album Celebrity sold in its first week. Almost 2 million physical albums. It just shows you the staggering scale of that old CD monoculture, a scale that is pretty much unimaginable today.
And what's wild is that the top of the charts was all over the place. You had legacy rock from the Beatles, reggae fusion from Shaggy, pure teen pop, all selling millions of copies. It just goes to show you that mass media, radio and MTV, could still create this shared experience for everyone. But that was about to change, and fast.
Right, because behind the scenes of all those massive CD sales, a technological war was raging. This was a brutal fight between the total, glorious anarchy of file sharing and the sleek, corporate control of a brand new player on the scene. To the music industry, this number right here was the enemy. 26.4 million. That was the number of verified Napster users at its peak in February 2001. That's the size of a country, all sharing music for free. The industry didn't see innovation. They saw an invasion. So the industry fought back. And they fought back hard. They sued, and by July, they'd won. A court ruling basically shut Napster down for good. And for a minute there, it seemed like a total victory. But as you can see from this timeline, the story was just getting started.
And this is exactly what happened next. It's what people call the Hydra effect. By cutting off Napster's one centralized head, two more just grew in its place. Decentralized networks like Kazaa and LimeWire just exploded. They had no central server to shut down, which made piracy even more popular and pretty much impossible to stop. The industry's big victory was actually a trap.
Then, an unexpected savior showed up. In October, with the entire industry drowning in this sea of piracy that it had accidentally created, Apple came along and threw it a life raft. And that life raft was the iPod. And the iPod's revolution was so simple. See, the industry's whole model was built around the album bundle, making you pay $16 for a whole CD when you really only wanted one or two songs. The iPod just destroyed that. It created the single-track economy. And suddenly, it wasn't about albums anymore. It was about having 1,000 individual songs in your pocket. And that fundamentally changed how we all value and consume music forever. Okay, so while this whole technological war was reshaping the business, an aesthetic war was tearing genres apart from the inside. And man, nowhere was this more obvious than in rock music. 4.8 million. That's how many copies Linkin Park's album Hybrid Theory sold just in the US in 2001 alone. Nu metal wasn't just some subgenre, it was the commercially dominant sound of American rock. Full stop. And its appeal was right there in this idea of a polished, melodic angst. It was heavy, but it was super catchy. It was emotional, but it was highly produced. This was the sound that was filling up stadiums and absolutely ruling the airwaves. But a rebellion was brewing. Because at the same time, down in the grimy clubs of New York City, the Strokes released their debut album. And critics immediately started calling it the album that saved rock and roll. And why? Because it was everything nu metal wasn't. So this was the battle for rock's identity. On one side, you had nu metal, with its heavy digital processing and its stadium-sized angst. And on the other, you had the garage rock revival, which was all about looking backward. Vintage guitars, raw energy, and this kind of effortless, detached cool. It was a fight for the very soul of the genre.
And this revolution wasn't just happening in rock. I mean, everywhere you looked, genres were transforming. Jay-Z completely redefined hip-hop. Britney Spears literally destroyed her innocent pop image. Alicia Keys brought raw musicianship roaring back to the charts. A movie soundtrack even made 1930s bluegrass a mainstream sensation. The ground was shifting under everyone's feet.
And then, everything just stopped. An event happened that didn't just shift the ground, it split it wide open. September 11th acted like a cultural guillotine, instantly and irrevocably changing the mood, the tone, and the sound of the entire country.
Alan Jackson's song just perfectly captured the nation's collective pause with this one question. The cynical, kind of hedonistic party of the first 8 months of 2001, it was over. And in the silence that followed, a totally new sound started to emerge.
The industry's reaction was immediate. Clear Channel, the biggest radio network in the country, circulated this list of over 160 songs they thought were lyrically questionable, and the reasons were all over the place. I mean, some, like AC/DC's Shot Down in Flames, were pretty obvious, but they also flagged Rage Against the Machine's entire catalog for political dissent, and even John Lennon's Imagine for being too anti-nationalist in a moment of intense patriotism.
The immediate result was a complete sonic reset. Everything that defined the sound of early 2001, all that irony, the aggression, the cynicism, it was just silenced, pulled right off the airwaves. And in its place, a new demand emerged. People wanted music that offered sincerity, comfort, and solace.
You can literally see how the cultural mood was just severed in two. That playful, aggressive, and often really cynical energy that defined most of the year was suddenly gone, replaced by this somber, earnest search for meaning and comfort. So, in the end, 2001 wasn't just a year of transition. It was the birth canal of the world we live in now. The technological disruption, the fragmentation of genres, the death of irony, and this rise of a new anxiety. All of it laid the foundation for the music landscape we know today. Ultimately, 2001 just completely reshaped our entire relationship with music. The shift from a physical album to a digital track, from one giant monoculture to a million different niches, from pre-9/11 cynicism to post-9/11 sincerity, all of it happened in that one single chaotic year. Which leaves us with the big question. Was 2001 the end of an era, or was it really the beginning of everything?